chiasm is a literary structure where you have a phrase or a subject stated at the beginning and the identical one at the end. And then you come into a next one and an identical one at the bottom and so forth, and it forms what I would call a sergeant's chevrons when you diagram it out. So what I've done is I've diagrammed out the section in Joel 2:1 through 2:15. It starts off with blow a trumpet in Zion. And blow a trumpet in Zion is said twice, once in verse 1 and then once in verse 15. So I am asserting that that marks the beginning and end of the chiasm. Now, the day of the Lord is going to be mentioned a couple more times in the book outside of this chiastic structure. But the day of the Lord will be mentioned inside the structure as well. So the next one we get, still in verse 1, let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, and then down to verse 12, return to me with fasting, with weeping, and with mourning. And what I'm suggesting to you is both of those are talking about fear, awe, reverence for the Lord. Same subject. The words are not precisely the same, but the subject is certainly the same. So the next level is the day of the Lord. It goes, blow a trumpet in Zion, let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, and then the day of the Lord is coming. And then down in verse 11, the day of the Lord is a great and very awesome, and then verse 12, return to me with weeping and fasting, and then 15, blow the trumpet in Zion. The day of the Lord forms the third level of nesting. So the next thing we have is a description of the day of the Lord. In verse 2, it says, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and thick darkness. And then down in verse 10, it says, the sun and the moon are darkened, and the stars withdraw their shining. So again, you have this idea of the day of the Lord being associated with darkness. Down to the next level, we have leaping going on. In verse 5, they leap on the tops of the mountains, and then in verse 9, they leap upon the city. Notice that these correspond pretty closely. Now, the deal with a chiasm is it's a literary structure that is intended to give more information than is just contained in the words. It's a layer of meaning that's conveyed in the structure. So typically, the point of the whole exercise is in the middle of the chiasm. In other words, you have things narrowing in and the same things being said before and after, and the center of that is typically what we're talking about. So in this case, I am going to assert that the center of this is verse 6, which says, before them, peoples are in anguish, all faces grow pale. We're talking about an invading army, or it could be a plague of locusts. In this section from 1 through 15 in chapter 2 of Joel, you could still be talking about the plague of locusts in chapter 1. Or you could be talking about an invading army. And furthermore, the plague of locusts in chapter 1 could also be talking about an invading army. So one other thing I want to say about chiasms before I get off of that subject. When I was first reading the Bible and knew considerably less than I know now, and I still don't know very much, I thought that there was a lot of repetition in there, a lot of redundancy. And that's before I understood things like chiasms and mashalim and how Eastern literature encodes knowledge. So a lot of this stuff that I used to think was, gee, just said that. If you know what you're looking for, adds extra meaning to the passage.